Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Tiger Talk TV. To start off today, just a few updates. You know, Dion, we often get comments about how quiet summers must be at the school, and I feel like this summer is kind of anything but quiet. A lot of stuff going on this summer, every summer, but especially this year. So, thought let's just start off and talk about that a little bit today.
Sure.
You know, we got regular summer cleaning that happens every year at every site, going through and making sure everything's ready for fall for the kids. But this year we got lots of other stuff too. So first big thing is the moves with early childhood and second grade, and trying to get the early childhood wing at Parkside all kind of laid out. So just give us a little update. I saw mover trucks out there today. How's that going?
Good. Yeah, we were moving the early childhood stuff from the middle school to Parkside today. And then the week of July 5th, we'll start moving some of the stuff from Parkside and the stuff from Westside that goes to Southview. So we'll have those two big moves done.
Yeah, it's a big step, but kind of exciting to see all those things going up in the boxes, getting packed up. I know the teachers worked really hard at the end of the year to get boxes filled, and it's amazing how many boxes. Like, you move your house, you think it's so many things, but you take a classroom full of stuff and then multiply that times an entire building or entire wing.
They did a great job.
Yeah, that's been good. So early childhood, the new wing at Parkside will be ready to go this fall. We get everyone moved over there. Then of course Southview, we see a lot of things taking place. You know, for a while we knew there was stuff happening. We saw the construction trucks, but there wasn't a lot changing outside. The last few weeks, there's been a lot changing outside there. I see windows going in. I see some more of the metal panels going up on the outside of that building, and parking lots being poured, and pretty exciting the final steps of that. So. That building's really coming together, getting ready for move. We still talking mid-July as completion, and then start moving in at that point?
Yeah, we're still hoping for a substantial completion July 19th, and we'll still have some more work to do, but we should be able to move some things in.
Yeah, that's great. I know the teachers are excited to get in there and check out their new rooms and get set up in that site, so that's good. We do have an open house plan. Just want to share with people that too. So we're planning open house during Sounds of Summer this year. So August 20th, that's that Friday afternoon, looking at from noon until 3, having an opportunity for our community to come through and really check that building out and get to see all the work that's taken place. And you know, I was visiting the other day with somebody. I said, this really is a gift from our community to have this school for the kids. You look at this West Side site. We've talked about a number of years, all the things that we'd like to see changed, and really a pretty amazing thing going on there, and be fun to get everyone in there. So August 20th, we just want people to mark their calendars and be ready to come and check that out, and we'll have some food on site and that kind of things too for people, so make that kind of a fun event. You know, the other thing that I noticed, there's that big pile of dirt out in front of the middle school. I've had people asking me, what are you guys doing there? What's going on there? So the old swimming pool, why don't you talk a little bit about that? What's going on there?
Yeah, so one of our projects that we had on our LTFM funding is to fill in the swimming pool. We're not 100% sure what we're going to do with that space, but there's different steps we're taking to get that pool area usable. It's been, we haven't used it for, I think, close to 10 years now.
It's been a long time. That's just been an unused space. Yeah. So getting that back online in a multi-purpose space of some sort for the community or something. Yeah. So that's fun. So I saw the dirt piles gone. So we must have that filled in now, and
yep, the dirt's in, and next step would be to put the concrete floor down.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun to see.
That will be fun to see. Certainly raised some questions with the pile of dirt in front of the middle school last week. So good. And then of course, in addition to all these maintenance projects taking place, we have the regular summer school programs taking place too. So targeted services, ESY, and credit recovery taking place between middle school and high school this year. The locations for those. So really we have the K-8 program, and then we have the high school program, credit recovery is a separate one. And the other thing taking place right now is we have summer college in the schools. Some opportunity for some juniors and seniors, next year's juniors and seniors, some classes there through the Marshall and Southwest Collaboratives. So regular classes taking place in addition to all the extra stuff. So
busy time. Very
busy time, but it's all good stuff. This is fun stuff. All right, so that is kind of our update for summer with the general dates and things to think about. Actually, today we're going to talk about budget, so maybe not quite as exciting as construction projects, but we need to have the budget figured out as well. So preliminary budget was presented to the board early this month, and here at the end of June, we're looking for the board to approve the budget, and then that's going to be our financial plan going forward for the next year. So Dion, Caron, the Director of Business Services, is along today to kind of walk us through that a little bit and share some of the information about that budget plan. So Dion, I'm pretty much going to turn this over to you and talk, and I'll kind of chime in a few things as we go
Sure.
through. But I know one of the first things we want to talk about as we're thinking about budget. Our budget is very much driven by student enrollment. So let's maybe start with a little conversation about enrollment, what's going on, and we know that COVID certainly had an impact on schools and enrollments this past year. So share a little bit kind of what's going on with Marshall Schools enrollments.
Yeah, so I mean, it's our goal to obviously have more students open enroll into our district than enroll into districts outside of ours. Last year we had a difference, a negative 13, but we were able to close that gap a little bit. This year down to 5, and as we've talked administratively, we're going to look at different ways that we can make sure that our residents are not open enrolling into other districts, and how do we attract some of those local district students into our district.
Sure.
Some of the other things that factor into our funding, besides just the enrollment, is our free and reduced student counts. We've really been focused on this. We had a great opportunity with federal funds last year, and they'll continue again this year to have free breakfast and lunch through federal funding. The unfortunate side of that is other funding that we receive drives off of the free and reduced applications that we receive, and because of the free lunches, our free and reduced application numbers fell. So as you can see, they've slowly gone up each year, and then last year went down to 41.5%, which doesn't seem like a large percent drop, but we'll visit a little bit about how that affects our funding dramatically when it comes to things like compensatory funding and
One of
some
those
other
things that has a big impact on the budget that I think a lot of people don't realize the connection that number of the free and reduced applications that ties back to so many funding sources for school districts. And
Right.
yeah, that was great for the federal government to offer the free lunches for everyone. We just have to find a way to get these forms filled out because we're hurting financially because of the lack of of responses we've had to that form from last year.
So like you said, we need to find a way to make sure the public knows how important it is for our funding, but also it's not just the free lunches when they qualify for free and reduced. It's activities and some other things that they can qualify for.
Right.
Special ed, we've seen a increase every year in that also. 2020, 2021, we saw a slight decrease, again, thinking that's directly related to COVID last year. Another number that's been increasing quite a bit for us is our minority students and our EL program. This, a lot like everything else, it's kind of like this broken record, but we've seen a steady increase every year. Last year we saw a pretty big dip in that, and we think that has something to do with COVID and also with some families moving out of our area during the school year. So we'll keep a close eye on that because that also drives some of our funding.
Right. And class size is probably the first thing we talk about when we look at student enrollment and how things are at. So you have a nice summary of that here to share next.
Yeah, and we found that years ago when we passed our operating referendum that actually ended in June of 2018, that it was very important to our community to keep our class sizes to a certain point, and our board put out the target guidelines for each classroom, and that's what we show here. We try to keep within those budget-wise and just making sure that the class sizes meet or don't exceed too much over those targets, and we've done a good job following those, whether it's increasing a class in one area or decreasing a class in another area, trying to keep those class sizes to where they need to be at.
Okay. And that's always a balancing act between what the budget allows and trying to maintain this class size to have the best opportunity for our students. So.
Right, exactly. This just shows our special ed staffing guidelines between the different programs and the different areas.
Sure. So let's talk about the budget a little bit.
All right. So did this budget a little different this year because last year, 1920, 2021 with COVID, there were so many different things going on, whether it was the governor's guidelines that we had to pay every employee 100% of their contracts in 1920, and then 2021 with the different funding mechanisms that came in. So we backed it up so it showed back to 1819, even though that's 3 years ago. We wanted to be able to show kind of what it was during a normal year. And as we're looking at hopefully 21, 22 to be that normal year again as a comparison. So general fund expenditures, general fund is our main fund. It just shows a general breakdown of our salaries, benefits, purchased services, supplies, capital expenditures, and did a couple of graphs here of the salaries, so it's easier to see. We have a nice steady increase, of course. You're going to see an increase each year, but it's not out of whack. Salaries were actually showing a 3.55% increase over last year total, which is right in line. Benefits were actually showing somewhat of a slight decrease compared to 2.39 increase, but a slight decrease of what we've seen in percentage-wise in previous years. That's because we were fortunate enough to go out for bid on our insurance, and we actually got an 8% decrease, so that'll help the employees and the district financially. Our purchase services, that is going to be a little up and down. Purchase services and supplies, both for last year and the year before. In 1920, we had our safety and security project that was funded through the state, but that actually went through the general fund. So you can see in 1920, our purchase services spiked up, but for next year, we're back in line where we should be. And then 2021 supplies, a big majority of that is our PPE. We spent quite a bit of money on cleaning supplies, masks, and other things to keep the students and staff safe while we were actually in school. So
everything things that we don't typically even consider for our budget, but important last year.
That's why I wanted to point out the graph, so you can see that 21, 22 is back in line to where previous years were. Yep. Revenue breakdown did a little different this year because we're still waiting for legislature to act. It's late in the game. We've gone this far before, but we really have no idea. We saw today, we got in their email, still a separation between the House and Senate and the governor. It makes it very hard for us to plan for next year, what to expect. So we're just kind of going off of some suggestions of what to do, but wanted to break down our revenue to show some of the reasons our outcome of our budget is directly affected by the legislature's act. So as we had talked before, our free and reduced applications have a direct effect of one of our biggest funding sources of compensatory revenue. And because we had that dip in our applications, we're actually expecting a little over $500,000 less in revenue. You and I had both thought maybe legislature was going to hold harmless that and we'd be able to see that money come back in. Right now we haven't heard anything, so we have to prepare for about $536,000 less in revenue than what would have been expected. And that's a statewide problem. Every district I've looked at is going to have some sort of a funding problem when it comes to compensatory revenue due to this.
It's a big hit and something that we don't have direct control over the change of, so that's a hard one for us.
And we could see it again in 22, 23, being that the lunches and breakfasts are free next year. Another one I just wanted to point out too is right now we're hoping for a 1% increase in our general ed formula. In the past few years, we've received 2%. Every year, we hope for more than 2% to close that gap between inflation and our funding, and you can see that that's spreading more and more. 1% is about $165,000. So if we typically get 2%, it's $165,000 that we're not getting in revenue that we typically would expect to help outweigh some of our expenditures.
And that's one of those pieces that as the legislation, as they're determining kind of what they end up offering, that could make a difference in this one. But for right now, we're being conservative and looking at that 1%. Pretty confident we'll get that. Possibility of 2 yet, but just not sure where that's going to fall. So
Right. Yep. So anticipated loss in revenue and the 1% instead of the 2% in general fund allowance. It's about $702,000 less in funding from the state that we would typically anticipate we would be receiving. Mm-hmm. So a pretty large chunk. Let me just break down our general fund revenue. There is some good news, with hopefully next fall being back in school face-to-face the whole year. We'll see our activities participation fees go back. I mean, that's about $108,000 in revenue. We'll see some of our concessions and admissions increase, or actually go back, I should say, because we didn't have admissions last year. That's actually $108,000. Our participation fees is around $171,000. So those are a couple of revenues that we saw decrease the last couple of years due to COVID. So we'll get those back. Below, we see the revenue by the state. Really, the main couple of things to point out would be that under basic skills, where it shows $527,000, part of that is that compensatory revenue. So part of that $500,000 less in revenue is that compensatory hit we're anticipating we might take. And then we do anticipate special ed state aid to increase about $130,000. Other areas in our general ed funding is our levy, which funding increased to $148,000 this year, and then also our federal funds, which is our title funds and our special ed federal funds, looking about the same as last year, about $11,000 higher.
I know you mentioned that some of our listeners might understand too that title is tied to the free and reduced count as well. What's interesting with that is the federal government said that we have a hold harmless with the title amounts, but we're not seeing that in some of the other pieces. So that's part of the reason we anticipated maybe a hold harmless with that for this year. And we just
great point of how many different things feed into those free and reduced applications.
So ESSER funding, you've got that kind of as one of your next topics. That's something we hear a lot about too. So the federal government certainly has offered a lot of different funding sources to schools, and I think we hear that from the legislators as well. As well, you got this money from the federal government that's going to cover things. That's a hard one because that money it's very tied to very specific things that we can use it for, and some things we can't use it for. We can't just put it in the general fund and use it for whatever. So let's talk a little bit about those ESSER funds and how much we're anticipating and kind of how we're planning to spend that money.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into that, Jeremy, is we're limited on how we use it, and it's also just one-time money.
Right.
Those percentage increase on our general fund it's every year we get that. So this is one-time money that will not replace those other state funds, but just did a little breakdown so the public could see the ESSER funds that we're receiving. There's been some different pots that we've received. The first pot was the ESSER 1 money, the GEARS, and the ESSER 9.5. That money we have expensed and received the revenue. That was a little over $397,000. The other one was the COVID Relief Fund, which was $743,000. Those were expenditures we had to spend by December 31st, 2020. So those funds came in, and we used it for some indoor air quality projects, some PPE, some additional nursing, and some custodians. So that first row we've expensed. And so now we're on the second or third pot of money, which is the ESSER 2 money, the $1.5 million. We have expensed that for 21-22, part of this preliminary budget, just so we can try and offset some of the lost revenue that we're not getting from the state or anticipating not getting from the state. Mm-hmm. So that kind of shows on this here, where last year we had about $904,000. It's a little more than that budgeted in ESSER funds, and then this year we're at about $1.6 million in ESSER funds that we've put in our revenue to help offset. So you can see the bottom line, even with those ESSER funds, we're sitting at about $798,000 deficit spending. And not to keep talking about it, but our anticipated lost revenue, if legislature holds true to this, is about $702,000. Hopefully legislature passes where we're hold harmless on our compensatory and gives us 2%, then we're looking at almost a break even for the year.
Right.
Some of the other funds, just kind of summarize a little bit. Our transportation, every year, and this is normal, our contracts go up. Unfortunately, our revenue from the state does not. So the offset there, we're looking at about a $74,000 deficit spending there this year. Our capital outlay is broken up between a couple of different funds. We've got capital outlay, and then we also have our LTFM funds, which is our long-term facility maintenance. It's important to express that long-term facility maintenance funds are helping us to do the pool area, our sidewalks, our parking lots, our roofs, our indoor air quality. So as we talk about deficit spending through our general fund, that isn't part of our LTFM funds. Those are separate funds, so we're able to do some of those to fix up our buildings and our sites. During the referendum on the new building, the Southview building, we heard very clear that the public wants us to make sure that we're keeping up on our current buildings so we don't end up in another situation like this. Given that West Side was an old building, there's only so much we can do, but we will definitely keep up on what we can with the funds we receive. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of just a summary of all our general funds. Overall, we're looking at about $857,000 deficit spending between the general, the transportation, and the capital expenditures. Something just wanted to kind of point out again, we had the operating referendum that expired in June of 2018. So we've had 3 years now that the operating referendum hopefully has shown some tax relief to our taxpayers. At some point, we're going to have that conversation again because we're spending down, and we're going to need those extra funds to be able to maintain our class sizes like they passed in the prior years.
Right. Reality is we've made it work for a few years, but we can't keep going where it's at with that.
Exactly.
So, yep. Things don't turn around.
Food service, our food service fund is doing well. We're looking at an excess of $23,700. We expect some of the revenue to return, like in our a la carte. You can see the state funding. There really is no state funding, so that money goes back in the state surplus. We're receiving federal funds for the free meals, breakfasts, and lunches next year. So we're sitting good there. You can kind of see here that our revenue outweighs our expenditures, a little opposite from last year's.
It's certainly been anything but normal with food service as well. But
our community services is broken up into some different pots also. We've got our community services, our ABE program, and our early childhood. Overall, those programs are running well. We're looking at an excess in the capital or in the community service fund about $39,000. So those funds run very well. And then our debt service, which is our principal and interest payments on our bonds, we're doing well there too. We're looking at an excess of about $407,000. That money sits in our debt service fund to pay on, like I said, the principal, interest, and future ones that are coming up.
Right. So the big question we get from people then is, what does that do to fund balance? We hear a lot of talk about fund balance and how the board has a projected or a kind of a bar set at it won't go less than 8%.
Yep.
And we've been a considerable amount above that for the last few years. So of course, as we spend down, it's going to affect that. Where does that put us with this next year?
Yeah, and like you said, we've been able to spend down. We had a healthy fund balance. We were able to spend down without reintroducing the operating referendum, and we knew that we could do that for a few years, and we're going to have to count on the public hopefully to pass that sometime in the near future. But we're looking at, we went from an actual fund balance of 16.5, that was an audited. Our projected revised budget for this 2021 school year is 15.16. That one could fluctuate a little bit. We're hoping that actually goes up a little bit after we're audited to see some of the state money that comes in after the end of the year. And then also the preliminary budget 21-22 with deficit spending about $700,000. So we're looking at about a 12.27. So like you said, we get to a point where we've done what we can, but we're going to have to lean on the public again with an operating referendum at some point so we can level that off or get it back up.
Right, and certainly we're trying to maintain the level of programming and services that we were able to provide, but as we go forward without extra funding from the state and some of those operating referendum, for example, it's going to be hard to continue to do what we're doing without some changes. So, and of course, right now this is preliminary budget. We're using very conservative numbers and being cautious. But we want to be good fiscal stewards as well and use the money fairly. And I think you had a good point too when you talk about there's a lot of projects taking place. We opened with that here this afternoon. Those projects are funded through multiple different funding sources, and with most of the funding we get, it's tied very specifically. There's only certain things you can do with some of those funds. So, the long-term facilities maintenance, for example, it's for facilities maintenance and keeping all of our facilities and grounds up. So that's something we want to be able to continue. So
about 85% of our general fund goes to salary and benefits, which we teach students. I mean, that's our major expense is staff, and I think you pointed out we want to be able to retain good staff because we want to have the best for our students in our community.
Right. There's been a conversation this year. I know a community who watches the school district, they see we've had a lot of retirements this year. We got a lot of experience leaving our district this year, and replacing those people and having other staff come in. We want to make sure we're still providing high quality services for our kids, and that's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. We look at the applications. It's hard to find a lot of applicants and such for positions. So we're almost wrapped up. We're going to have to wrap up. We're about out of time. So any last minute things, Dion, that you want to share that we haven't talked about?
No, I just want to, the budget, it is what it is. Like you said, we're being conservative. I think we're, like we always have been, very fiscally responsible, but we have a lot to celebrate. We, thanks to the community, we have got the new addition at Parkside for our early childhood that will be done, and at some point we'll have an open house over there too. Southview, we're looking at towards the middle end of July, completion there with the open house on the 20th. At a wedding, we don't have to wear masks anymore, so there's still a lot to celebrate with the school district and our community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dion, thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, we thank you for tuning in, hearing about our budgets and updates. So, till next time, thank you.